Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack a fascinating and, well, let's be totally honest here, a slightly terrifying reality about human nature. Because, look, we all have this underlying tension, don't we? It's this deep-seated desire for control. Control over our lives, our circumstances, and yeah, sometimes even over the people and events around us. Whenever we feel helpless, we just feel absolutely miserable. Nobody wakes up wanting less power. Literally everyone wants more. But how we actually go about getting it, well, that's exactly where things get a bit messy. Which brings us to a really crucial question. Is it actually possible to completely avoid the game of power? See, today we live in a world that's facing a very specific, very modern paradox. We desperately need power to just survive and thrive, but at the same time, we know it's incredibly dangerous to look power-hungry. We're constantly told that everything's got to appear civilized, democratic, and totally fair. You can't just go around making overt power moves anymore. So we end up caught in this trap where we have to be super subtle. Congenial yet cunning. Democratic, but, well, a little devious. And the thing is, if you take those societal rules of fairness way too literally, you might just end up getting crushed. The great Renaissance diplomat Niccolo Machiavelli, he put it pretty bluntly. He said, "Any man who tries to be good all the time is bound to come to ruin among the great number who are not good." It sounds completely ruthless, I know, but it immediately establishes the remarkably high stakes of our social reality. Basically, if you just choose to ignore the dynamic of power, you are leaving yourself incredibly vulnerable to the people who are out there actively playing the game. So, to truly understand this inescapable reality, we're turning to our source text for this explainer, Robert Greene's incredibly famous and honestly deeply polarizing book, The 48 Laws of Power. You should really think of this text as a survival manual. It's designed to decode the unspoken rules of what Greene essentially describes as a constant civilized war. It strips right past all those polite facades we all wear every day and looks directly at the mechanics of control that have been operating behind the scenes for literally centuries. Greene actually argues that our modern social dynamic most closely resembles the world of the historical courtier. These were aristocrats who had to navigate the incredibly delicate power dynamics of the royal court. Historically, kings, queens, emperors, they held absolutely all the cards. Overt, violent power grabs, highly frowned upon, like that would likely get you killed. So courtiers had to figure out how to outwit and thwart their opponents through indirect, deeply subtle maneuvering instead. This brings us right to what Greene calls the velvet glove approach. The truly successful courtier learned to make literally all of his moves indirect. They completely avoided overt coercion or any kind of outright treachery. Instead, they leaned heavily into seduction, charm, deception, and planning several moves ahead. Actually, Napoleon himself advised this very strategy when he said, "Place your iron hand inside a velvet glove." If a skilled courtier ever stabbed an opponent in the back, it was with that velvet glove securely on and accompanied by the absolute sweetest of smiles. And the most fascinating part of all this? That dynamic hasn't disappeared at all. It's really just evolved. Transitioning over to the modern day, we constantly run into people who claim they absolutely do not play power games, what Greene actually calls the non-players. They'll tell you the very idea is evil, asocial, or just some relic of the past. Now, what's really interesting about this is that Greene vehemently warns us to be aware of these exact individuals. People who loudly flaunt their moral qualities and claim they're totally opting out of the game, they're often just throwing dust in our eyes. In fact, they can be among the absolute most adept and dangerous players of all, because they brilliantly disguise the true nature of their manipulation. Let's break down how Greene compares claimed intent versus actual strategy. Take the demand for perfect equality in every single area of life. For example, on the surface, sure, that looks like simple, plain fairness. But Greene argues that treating absolutely everyone equally actually means ignoring real differences, which ends up suppressing those who excel and elevating the less skillful. So it's really a disguised power strategy to redistribute rewards. Or consider perfect honesty. Being completely, perfectly honest inevitably hurts and insults people, right? In truth, Greene suggests that deploying perfect honesty is just a subtle form of coercion. They're using it to convince you of their noble, selfless character while simultaneously putting you completely on the defensive. And honestly, that logic perfectly transitions us into Law 22, the surrender tactic. This law teaches us how to actually transform weakness into power. When you're the weaker party, Greene advises you definitely don't fight just for honor's sake. No, you choose to surrender instead. But here is the absolute genius of his argument. Making a deliberate, public show of your powerlessness is actually a highly effective strategy.
it gains you sympathy, it completely disarms your opponents, and it buys you crucial time to recover, all while secretly infuriating your conqueror. Think about it. True powerlessness wouldn't publicize itself to gain an advantage. So, that non-player's supposed weakness, it's actually a finely tuned weapon.
And this really illustrates the sheer breadth of the strategies packed into Greene's book. We've grouped a few of the 48 laws together here just to show you the kind of arsenal that's available to the modern courtier. On one side of the coin, we have concealment. Law 3 tells us to conceal our intentions just to keep people totally off balance. And Law 4 advises always saying less than necessary. Why? Because powerful people impress and intimidate simply by keeping their mouths shut. But, and this is key, this is perfectly balanced on the flip side by action. Law 28 demands entering action with absolute boldness, and Law 15 insists on crushing your enemy totally. It's this incredibly calculated dance between hiding your true motives and then executing these sudden, decisive maneuvers. Let's zoom in on law number 1, never outshine the master. Greene warns that in your eager desire to please or impress your boss, you might actually accidentally inspire fear and insecurity in them. Historically speaking, this had literal deadly consequences. Take King Louis XIV's finance minister, Nicolas Fouquet. He threw this incredibly lavish, over-the-top party to impress the king, but it totally backfired. It just made Louis feel incredibly insecure and upstaged. The result? Fouquet spent the entire rest of his life sitting in a solitary prison cell. To attain power, Greene advises, you actually have to make your masters appear more brilliant than they really are. Let's move over to Law 14 and see how this all builds. Pose as a friend, work as a spy. This part of the book completely reframes how we view polite society. It suggests that those friendly, everyday encounters, they're actually prime opportunities for artful spying. Greene notes that knowing about your rival is absolutely critical. Now, you don't need to be some sort of secret agent in a trench coat, you just need to learn how to properly probe. According to the text, by just asking casual, indirect questions during a friendly chat, you can get people to spill their weaknesses and intentions without them ever even realizing you're gathering valuable intel. And then, we hit the heavy artillery. Law 15, crush your enemy totally. This is a ruthless historical truth that's been observed by great leaders literally since Moses. The idea is, if even one tiny ember is left alight, no matter how dimly it's smoldering, a fire will eventually break out. Stopping halfway might feel like the nice, civilized, merciful thing to do, but Greene warns it only gives an enemy the breathing room to recover and seek revenge later. If you are going to take action against an adversary, Greene argues you have to crush them, not just in body, but completely in spirit. So the crucial point is this: you can either learn the rules or be a pawn to those who do. The underlying message of this entire source text is that the game of power is quite frankly entirely inescapable. Just underneath the glittering, polite surface of our civilized world is this bubbling cauldron of dark emotions, greed, envy, and lust. Greene posits that it's essentially just a law of human nature. You can plug your ears and try to ignore it all you want, but these rules are being applied to you every single day by the people around you. Which leads us to our final question for you to ponder today. Who in your life is using the perfect honesty or weakness power play right now? Seriously, I challenge you to look at your own social circles, your workplace, maybe even your family dynamics with fresh eyes. Now that you know the signs of the velvet glove and the myth of the non-player, I guarantee you're going to start seeing these maneuvers absolutely everywhere. To fully protect yourself, and hey, perhaps even master the game yourself, there is a whole lot more to uncover in the full text. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep your eyes open out there.